Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Angela, I've never been this happy. How about you?
I am tippy-tappy today.
Awesome. Well, today should be kind of fun because we're going to talk about reverse mentoring. And so what I mean by that is it's a structured learning relationship where the junior employees are mentoring the senior employees. And so it's not a flip of authority, but it's an exchange of perspectives and skills and lived experiences that the senior leaders might not have access to otherwise. And so if we're going to do reverse mentoring in an organization, it's going to be much more effective when it's treated as a strategic learning opportunity and not some symbolic inclusion. The truth of the matter is, the more senior you get, the more true it is that junior people are much closer to the work than you are as the executive. And so when you're doing this, when you're looking at it, you certainly don't want to be doing this in some symbolic inclusion operation where, for instance, having focus groups just for the sake of having a focus group. So you can say, look, we really are listening, but in fact, you're not really including it and you're not taking any action on the things that they tell you. That kind of a view, that's not reverse mentoring. That's just a waste of time. So what we're going to talk about today is how to use reverse mentoring to actually improve the organization.
Yeah, so you gave a couple of examples just now, Bill, that really helps define what reverse mentoring is and what it isn't. But to give a little bit more context about that, let's talk a little bit about what reverse mentoring is. And it's really a two-way learning opportunity for the executive to learn from the junior employee, as well as vice versa, really. And it can also be where senior leaders get feedback and listen to their junior employees. Sometimes there are some real formal reverse mentoring programs, Bill, and I don't think that's what you and I really necessarily are pushing for or advocating. That from our experience, it's been a lot more of the informal reverse mentoring that has had the most benefit for you and me.
I totally agree. I mean, if you're going to talk about reverse mentoring, you're trying to set it up so that you're making it clear as a senior leader that you want people to tell you when you don't know everything that you need to know for the company to be successful. So, I mean, it's a change in a culture, I would suggest.
You want the truth. You need the truth.
That's right. Yeah. Even if I can't handle the truth, I still actually do want the truth.
Absolutely. And so often it's focused on topics like digital fluency, emerging trends, cultural and generational insights, and then also just gaining insight into customer behavior. And we'll get into each of those in a little bit more detail. But just know that really culture is based on behaviors, and senior leaders can gain tremendous insight from their junior folks throughout the organization to let them know what are the actual behaviors that are occurring in the organization. I think you have experienced some of not realizing what's going on at the deck plate level until having some of these more reverse mentoring kind of conversations.
Undoubtedly so. And I know we're going to get to some examples, but it's so critical that you, in fact, are told by the folks around you that you're missing things and that you're not perceiving all of the issues that the folks who are doing the work are experiencing. And it's just sort of fundamental. If you're truly interested in constantly improving, constantly getting better, constantly being successful, you're not going to do it by assuming that you know everything or that you're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. And so really, reverse mentoring is designed to increase leader awareness, adaptability, and continued relevance, especially in their technological space. This is not intended to be a gossip session about other leaders in the organization, though you can get data and trends from others that you use to address cultural issues within the organization. And so really the way to start those conversations is to say, how are you doing? And see where that leads with a junior employee.
Yeah, that's sort of a critical piece when you're talking about that. getting, particularly as people come to see you and you think you're going to have one conversation, but it's clear that they're not with you yet. There's a lot else. There's something else going on in their life that's preventing them from being in the conversation with you. That "How are you doing?" Question and really pulling that thread can be a very valuable tool.
It can. Now, so it's not meant to be therapy or venting, but that "how are you doing" might allow an opportunity for some clearing of the if you ask the question, "How are you doing?" and the person just does start venting, that might need to happen before you get to the real crux of the matter, to hear what is really going on. And you, as the senior employee, you don't need to dive into the emotional side of whatever's happening from the junior employee. It's better that if you don't dive into the emotional side of it and you remain, steady Eddie, to be the most effective and to actually hear what it is that's the true crux of the matter.
Yeah. So, really the mentoring part, it's really about helping people grow, right? And so the reverse mentoring piece is helping you grow as a leader, with a 360-degree perspective. When you get mentoring from senior leaders, you learn how to develop skills to move up a ladder. But when you're getting mentoring from your subordinates, you're learning how to run your teams more effectively and where you as the leader can influence the change in support of everyone on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what are some use cases where reverse mentoring is especially effective. If you in the organization, if you want to modernize your leadership thinking, this is a perfect case for reverse mentoring. Think about the pace of technology, of AI, of social media, of digital products. And you, as the senior executive, probably don't have as much experience as your junior employees in those areas. So, what can you learn from them? Our cutting edge moves so fast now that it's important to have people more in tune with current technologies and how that can help you reach your target audience or your customer base effectively. So, in the technology sector, which is where Bill and I came from primarily, some of the most knowledgeable employees are often recent college graduates.
Yeah. I mean, it's so clear in my mind because of examples that we lived through. I mean, we had some software efforts that had been working on for years to improve, and had struggled through it. And, and we had some new professionals, the recent college grads, come on board, and we gave it to a group of 6 of them. They literally solved the problem in 3 months, built the code, delivered the code, had it running in production in 3 months for something that had been vexing us for years. And so it's like, guys, why are we fighting this feeling that we should really be leaning into in this sector, in technology, certainly in software? There's people with much more up-to-date skills that are coming right out of school, and they can help teach all of the rest of us, including the senior engineers who've been out of school a bit longer. Oh, wow, I didn't know I could do it that way. And so there's great reverse mentoring, not just for the senior leaders, but even the people who are in the middle of the organization who are still a little bit further out of school, and they're getting reverse mentored by some of the newest folks who have a new set of skills that weren't available when those senior folks went to school.
Mhm. So it's great if you're a more senior employee to hear from junior employees what technology they're leveraging or that they're expecting to leverage. What resources would they recommend for you to learn about it?
Yeah, well, and so here's fair warning to all of you junior employees who would like to do reverse mentoring, because the danger is that some of those senior people you reverse mentor might actually listen, and they might actually read the things that you give them. Uh, it wasn't that long ago that some more junior employees came to me as the big boss and said, "Hey, we've got to modernize the way we deliver software." And so they pointed me at things like the DevOps Handbook and the Phoenix Project, which is a novel about a big company that was struggling with some software deliveries and how DevOps was an improvement. And so it's actually a great way to deliver the message that just as importantly, the reverse mentoring was delivered in a way that was very consumable by the senior executive, even though I'm not a software expert. And so they delivered the DevOps Handbook, the Phoenix Project, another book called Accelerate, where they were written for people who are leading these things but who aren't necessarily the developers. And so the reverse mentoring was delivered in such a manner that I could easily understand why that was important for us to fix what we were doing. And I really leaned into it. And so the warning I'm giving to the junior employees is because after a while, I read it and started asking hard questions like, hey, wait a minute. The handbook says we should be doing it this way. Why aren't we doing that yet? And eventually, they got to the point where like, Bill, we need to not let you read things anymore because you start holding us accountable for actually delivering on that. And I
Reading is
say,
overrated.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Who knew Bill could read? I get the humor in the conversation, but it was really, really valuable reverse mentoring that turned out to be fundamentally not just good for our organization, but actually spread way out beyond just our one organization to a much broader section of the government and of the Navy. Like we really need to modernize how we're doing things, and so that was invaluable reverse mentoring, and just was really really cool because it was so exciting to be leaning into something so hard like that. Now, in fairness, this is not a new thought. I mean, you can go back to the late 1990s when Jack Welch was the boss at General Electric, and he made a serious effort to make sure that the senior leaders were being mentored by the younger employees on the internet and digital tools. So it was just an earlier version of the experience that I had had. In my experience was much later than that, but the impact was, the leaders stopped delegating digital things to specialists. Like, oh, I don't know anything about digital, so I'm going to hand that off to everybody junior to me. It's like, wait a minute, if digital is the way of the future, then there's some serious strategy that we need to be discussing. And I need to at least be able to ask intelligent, strategic questions of all those folks about where we need to go. And as you get smarter as the senior executive on the technology areas, again, it's not an attempt to make you the person who's doing all the work, but you get much better at making faster decisions, because the executives now can evaluate the proposals directly because they have an understanding of the environment, and you shift from sort of command and control, where I'm always in charge as the big boss, to a lot more curiosity and learning as I'm going through the efforts.
So if I could just parrot back what I heard. So digital products, the internet, this is all new in the 90s. And Jack Welch saw it as the future of the company. But what he noticed is probably he himself, as well as other executives, were delegating that off because it was such a new technology that they didn't have any experience with. They were delegating those tasks and projects to the more junior employees. And what he did was he opened a reverse mentoring opportunity where those senior executives sat back and learned from the junior employees how to use these digital products. What is the internet, these interwebs? What are you talking about there? And they actually had an opportunity to learn so that they could make faster decisions about digital technology, so that they could understand proposals quicker and respond to those. And that actually developed a culture of curiosity and learning from the senior executives within GE. Did I capture that right?
I think you got it exactly right. And in our experience, in my personal experience, so after I got reverse mentored by some of our junior employees, I actually was able to reverse mentor some of the people I worked for up the chain of command in saying, we can't continue to do things the way we've always done them. The world has changed, and we in the Navy where we were working had not modernized along with a lot of the rest of the world, and we had to get much better at that. And it became a big change for everybody. So the reverse mentoring continued up the chain, as it turned out.
You had enough knowledge to be dangerous.
Well, yeah, ask any of the junior employees. I was a very dangerous leader that way. But I mean, really, what a piece that I don't want to miss on this is there's real value in the leaders acknowledging they're not the smartest people in the room all the time. Real value in that. They're modeling the humility that says it's okay for me to learn something in public. And so what that sort of fosters is, maybe it's okay for people to experiment a lot more across the organization. We're not waiting for the big bosses to tell us what to do. And so that's just invaluable in modernizing, in making sure that you're keeping pace with the industry that you're working in.
Just as an add to that conversation, when a leader demonstrates that they don't know everything, it actually shares some level of vulnerability that also increases psychological safety so that other employees can admit that they don't know either.
Well, absolutely, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about psychological safety as a critical piece of this of reverse mentoring. If you want people to feel like they can provide that, they need to know that they're in a safe place while they're doing it.
Absolutely. Another way that reverse mentoring, or another use case that reverse mentoring comes into play, is bridging those generational and or life stage gaps that happen commonly, to where maybe you have some work norms or communication styles, or your motivations or career expectations are set at your level in the organization. So as an example, of course, COVID hit our organization really hard, just like every other organization and company in the world, right? And during COVID, internal to our organization, something that grew organically was this idea of parents for parents. And it really gave the senior leaders of the organization, many of whom, not all, but many of whom no longer had kids at home, and they didn't have the same perspective at how COVID was impacting parents who still had kids under their roof, whether they're babies all the way up through high school and beyond potentially, and how the impact of working from home was also impacting them as parents, and the different ways that they were being pulled throughout the day.
Yeah, so that was an invaluable learning experience for me for sure because I had kids, but my son was out of the house, and so when the younger folks who had young kids came to us, it changed the way we behaved. And in fact, not only did they reverse mentor us, but we actually put them in charge of trying to change the policies, presenting us with, okay, so let's present policies that will work. And so we took the reverse mentoring one step further and said, okay, we're actually going to put you in charge up to a point. We'll put boundaries on that at some level. But what do you recommend as the best way for us to support the organization, particularly for those areas where all of us senior leaders are not experiencing the same problems that the people who are younger in their life are experiencing right now? And so, the quote, the very famous philosopher Ted Lasso, he said, "Be curious, not judgmental," which I think originally came from Walt Whitman. But the point being, instead of judging what they were telling us, we tried to demonstrate some curiosity about, so help me understand what the problems are so we can do something about that. So
Mhm.
as we look sort of more broadly, it really becomes a discussion about improving inclusion and belonging across the organization. And so I want to make sure, in today's world, that nobody thinks I'm trying to advocate for any kind of a political view of DEI or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm simply talking about good leadership means making sure that everybody who's in the organization knows that their inputs and their experience is valued. And so if I want to really value all the people in the organization and I'm going to lead large teams, I need to understand the backgrounds that are there. I need to understand their perspectives as best as possible. What are the obstacles they have now or have had in the past? And how can I influence change to remove some of those obstacles? And so I want them to mentor me in understanding the team. I need their help to understand the issues. And so that's not unique in any kind of a political fashion. That's a fundamentally important aspect of leading a team of any size. If you want to take advantage of all the people you got to understand the range of backgrounds and experiences they have, and everything that each of the members of the team is bringing to the fight. Leading a team effectively means being able to take advantage of their breadth of knowledge and their perspectives. And so that means understanding all of the lived experiences of your team members because it's very, very different. And I actually I got some serious reverse mentoring. If we go back to the 2020 area and the time around the killing of George Floyd and all of the unrest that lived in the country that affected all of us. Any way you look at it, it had some effect. And so it was very educational for me to talk to people from very different backgrounds. Just because a law has changed somewhere, does that mean everybody's treated equally? Do you think we all have the same life experiences that we're bringing to the workplace? It's not my job as the big boss to fix everybody's problem, but any good leader is going to try to understand those backgrounds as it affects everybody's perception and their approach to working on the team. Understanding whose problem it is, that's step one. And the problem doesn't automatically go away just because you have some understanding. Just like acknowledging there are differences when people grow up in different areas of the country, you don't have to go that far to get the differences. There's difference. If you talk to folks from Alabama, they're probably going to have a different perspective than people who grew up in New York City, who are going to have a different perspective from people who grew up in LA. And so it's not specific to all of the things that were of concern in the DEI discussion. It's specific to everybody, that they all have backgrounds and life experiences that they bring to the fight. And it's important as a team leader to understand those things. And reverse mentoring can help the boss understand those perspectives so that they are able to lead better.
One example that also just came to mind with that, Bill, is, I mean, I can even look inside of my own family, right? We grew up in the same house, but my older brother's experience with his undergraduate education was slightly different than my experience, where
Really?
he went to UC Berkeley and I went to the Air Force Academy. Slightly different cultural differences between his schooling and my schooling. And so I would imagine that if we were employed by the same organization, that we would bring different experiences to to the team. So the point goes to, within your own team, what are the experiences that each team member brings? You and I have an experience of learning leadership and being part of a leadership laboratory from the time we were essentially 17 and 18 years old. And many of the people that we worked with didn't have that experience, certainly in their undergraduate education, and didn't until they became leaders of a project. And that could have been in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, or beyond. And so just understanding that as well, and understanding where their knowledge is, what their skills are, what their background is, really can give us a better perspective as well.
Undoubtedly so. And frankly, this idea scales absolutely. Whether you got 50 or 500 employees, there's going to be cultural shifts that come with growth and so forth. And so when things happen, like there's some sort of a merger or there's some like slice off a part of a company, it's going to change the environment, and the people that you're going to have there are going to have a different view of how that happened, what effect that had on their lives and their friends and their families, and understanding all of that at some level, at least. You're not going to fix all the problems, but understanding the concerns of all those junior employees when that kind of thing happens is fundamental if you think you're going to lead them through the change.
Absolutely. And also, one other area that reverse mentoring helps with is helping you as an executive stay close to your customers, because younger employees often mirror emerging customer segments. You can learn from younger employees what is emerging, what is it that they are interested in, what kind of collaboration tools are they leveraging to communicate between each other and with their customer base, when and how do they engage their customers. And when you understand that, then that can help influence you on impacting business decisions. What are the marketing opportunities that you have? How does that impact your sales goals? Where are you thinking about modifying your product to meet emerging trends? All of this can be learned through junior employees and their connections with customers as well.
Absolutely true. It occurs to me that one of those kinds of cultural things, when we were building systems, we were still talking about how many of the problems when somebody didn't know how to use it was a training problem, and we needed better manuals and all that kind of stuff. And if you talk to anybody who's using software these days, who's nowhere near my age, much, much younger than my age, if you said, "Where's the manual?" they kind of laugh at you, because I've been laughed at many times for asking that question. Bill, you just do it, because that's their experience. They expect the system to be intuitive, and they expect it to help them get stuff done. And so there's no doubt that there's a bunch of mentoring that went on to a bunch of very senior people in the very large bureaucracy that we worked in. And I don't just mean at our center, but across the Navy, across the Defense Department or the War Department. That there are still people out there who think that training is always the problem, as opposed to maybe the system's too hard to use and we should fix the system, not yell at the people who didn't understand how to use it because we didn't train them enough. So there's all sorts of reverse mentoring that's opportunities in that we should be taking much, much greater advantage of. And it applies across many, many industries.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, when we think about what makes reverse mentoring effective, Bill, it's when it's informally done. So it does not need to be some formal process where there's a paired matching between mentor and mentee. That can be okay. We're not saying you can't have formal reverse mentoring, but really, even those coffee chats, water cooler chats, just stops in the hallway, those can be excellent informal reverse mentoring opportunities. And if you're a junior employee, it's effective when you see it modeled by the senior leaders of the organization or the company, right? It's really effective when it promotes an environment of psychological safety. And this goes back to what we were talking about sharing vulnerability, like Jack Welch did within GE. When he and his executives demonstrated that it's okay not to know everything, that it's okay to learn, be in an environment of learning, that actually helped create psychological safety for all of his employees below the executive level to come with, I don't understand. I am curious about the technology at hand. And really, the big piece too about reverse mentoring is to recognize it is still mentoring. And one of the key pieces about mentoring is confidentiality. And so what we would encourage is, even if you're having a water cooler kind of conversation or a hallway stop kind of conversation, understand that what your junior employee is telling you still has some standards of confidentiality around it. And we would encourage you to really maintain that.
Yeah, undoubtedly. So, you sort of hinted at it, and so we ought to talk a little bit about maybe some common pitfalls that people want to avoid when we're talking about reverse mentoring. Obviously, and you were hitting on just a second ago, you don't want to create some sort of an untrustworthy environment. The psychological safety piece is fundamental to making this effective. If junior employees are saying, "Hey, boss, I think there's a better way to do this," and the senior employee are, shooting the messenger, lop it. Hey, boss, I think we're making a mistake. We should do it this way. And you lop that person's head off in some public or even private fashion. It's like, that's the last time they're going to bring you any ideas about how to improve the situation. So they have to feel that it's safe to make respectful recommendations about how we could improve the environment, improve the company. Now, if you're the junior person, I'd recommend at this point, you need to be aware of your environment and know how things go. You don't have to go very far to think of examples of places where there are senior leaders who fire people when they don't agree with them. And so if that's your environment, yeah, I know it's hard to believe, but if that's the environment, maybe there isn't psychological safety, and you want to be careful about how you're delivering that message. And so be paying attention as a junior person to whether or not the senior executives are modeling the behavior that actually supports speaking up and, without losing any body parts. Now, if you're the senior leader, you don't want to be saying, "Oh, here's, that person constantly gives me good stuff. So I'm going to grab this junior person. I'm going to take up a lot of their time with reverse mentoring discussions." So you're overburdening a few employees. I would totally advise people to get reverse mentoring from a very wide breadth of the employees at the organization. Don't pick on just a few. It's great if they're those few, they may be good mentoring candidates for you. If they're the kind of people who are leaning in, they may be demonstrating that they're the kind of people you want to help lead for the future. But if you're sucking up all their time with reverse mentoring, that may create some other problems. As we talked about earlier, if you're doing reverse mentoring activities, but you're never tracking okay, somebody makes a recommendation. Okay, are we doing something about that? Are we helping to fix that problem? Are we continuing to get feedback? If you're skipping that part, you're just listening and they keep on venting these problems and you never do anything about that. Okay, you're not setting yourself up for a very positive interaction, and you should expect that the reverse mentoring inputs you get will dry up very, very quickly. Just because you are now aware of the problem, that doesn't mean you got any change out of it. And you have to lean into that. If you're the senior person and you're serious about reverse mentoring, listen and do something about it. This isn't just checking a box somewhere so I could say, "See, I'm listening to all my junior employees." If you're just getting people together to chat for a while and then you never do anything with it, then all you're doing is wasting everybody's time. And so if you're wasting time, you're wasting money. Don't do that kind of reverse mentoring. That would be an awful way for this to end.
Yeah. When reverse mentoring is effectively used, it improves leadership skills. It improves leaders listening without getting defensive. It improves admitting when they don't know something. It improves their adaptability and leadership style based on the context of the situation. It improves their understanding of lived experiences of their employees. And it improves their decision making to where they can make decisions faster and better informed.
Yeah. So, I mean, bottom line, reverse mentoring works when the leaders are genuinely willing to be changed by what they learn. And used well, it really builds humility, relevance, and trust across the organization. So, with that as a bottom line, what did we leave out?
We're fans of reverse mentoring. We would call it just mentoring.
Okay, we'll go with that. So, with that, thanks very much for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share it with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.